just, and I understand she had a presentation, or they've had a presentation to try to coordinate these services. Is that a partner that can be reached out, or is there some level of
Commission on
collaboration
Aging.
already happening with Commission on Aging? And if you know.
What I want to say about that is that the population of people that we serve tend to have a lot of needs. And so when we refer them to a program like that, then we get phone calls from the program typically, and they say, we just are not equipped to handle these sorts of issues. So there really is not a good resource out there for people who can't afford attorneys. There really is not. Legal aid, they do wonderful work. They don't participate in probate court matters. The times that we have referred people to legal clinics, they come back to us and say, oh, I only had 15 minutes with them and they didn't answer all my, there's just not a really good solution for that. The Michigan Legal Help website has been expanded to include probate matters, and at this time it's quite a bit better than it was when it started. I don't hear a lot of feedback from people at the counter about that, so I don't know if they go to this website and they find it extremely helpful and it answers all their questions. I'm not sure. I wish there was a good answer for that.
Yeah. Do you have any budget for, getting the word out, education, collaboration with other organizations to increase awareness of the guardianship initiative? Is there any part of the budget related to helping with that?
Part of our budget is not allocated to that, but Judge Witten and all of our staff are aware of this program, and we have increased our efforts in attempting to get people to understand the benefits of the program. We do have people that call them and have been helped by them. I just don't think, I could speculate for a long time about what the reasons are. Like I said, I think people wait until it's too late for any other option because they don't want to take this person's independence away, and then they come in when the person's in the hospital or in a coma, or the nursing home says they really need someone to make decisions for them. I don't know, perhaps that's past the point of when they can agree to put a power of attorney in place.
Yeah, there's a great program. It's kind of like education training for caretakers that Commission on Aging and Area Agency on Aging has been working on together, and across the region. They fill up right away, as you imagine, with a growing aging population and more caretakers, trying to take care of their moms or dads or whatever's. That may be a good connection to maybe just add to the work that they're doing with caretakers, just to give it a little, even a brochure or a little plug in that.
Thank you for that information.
Yeah, that might be a good way to get connected to some more people before it's too late.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner McAllister.
Like the common thread of everything, it all comes down to money, but what is the discrepancy for your hiring and where you're at, and what do other people pay, if you have that information?
That's a very good question. So right now, the last person that we hired made a comment about how she's got a master's degree, and she's an office specialist. So I would say that we're grateful for the increases that we've gotten over the last few years, extremely grateful. It is very difficult, like others have said, for someone, when you're recruiting and you have people who potentially would like to come here from another area, we have had people have to turn down offers because they can't find anywhere to live that they can afford. I do think that every little bit helps. So like I said, our staff has been eternally grateful for the increases that we've had over the last few years.
I understand that. So what are your wages, and what are you comparing it to, and what is the discrepancy? I mean, what's the bridge, if you have that?
To be honest, our positions, I think when someone starts in our office, they're not ever fully aware of how complicated it is to work at a court and how much legal knowledge it requires and how many months of training they have to spend learning their job. I mean, it takes maybe a year before they really understand what they're doing. I would also say that periodically we do comparisons with other counties to see, with other counties' probate courts, to see if we are in line with other probate courts. We have not done that in a while. So I can't answer if we are more or less currently than others because I haven't reached out to other counties recently.
Okay, thanks.
Comments, questions anymore? Register Flowers? Thank you for coming in today in your report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move along to 5F, Community Corrections, Manager Shively. As soon as Cliff gets out of your way. Or is done setting you up your report, excuse me. He's helping. IT is never in the way, they're always
Yeah,
helping.
they're always helping. The magic wand.
Good morning. Sheree Shively, the manager of the Community Corrections Department. I just did a pretty thorough presentation to you guys back in May, so I don't anticipate this going too long, but we'll go over some overall functions of our department. So our department's unique. We work with both circuit court and district court, as I've mentioned that to you before. We do a jail alternative programming for both of those courts. Those are individuals who have been sentenced to jail. We take them out of jail and place them into different locations in lieu of jail to start addressing the underlying reasons why they're in the justice system. We also provide services to those on felony bond. As it's been mentioned before, all felony cases start in the district court and then are bound over to the circuit court, and so we work with those clients while they're in the district court and the circuit court. I thought that was very important when we created our pretrial services department, was that instead of us working with them in one part, they go to a different court and somebody else helps them. It's just one department that's servicing that individual from the start of their case to the resolution of their case. We provide all electronic monitoring for the district court and some of the circuit court individuals. That includes GPS monitoring, which is an ankle monitor on the ankle. We provide an ankle alcohol monitor that detects tests for alcohol every 30 minutes. And then we also provide in-home breathalyzers that can test anywhere from 1 time a day up to 10 times a day. Not that that happens, but they can test multiple times a day. And so those are some of the programs that we have there. Our personnel and staffing plan right now, we have 5 positions, including myself. Right now, we are fully staffed. In September, we will be down. We have 2 people that are resigned and will be done in September. So along what everybody else has said about the difficulties in retaining staff, I wanted to give you a different perspective. So one of the positions, I posted that position a month ago, and I have received 5 applications for that position. 3 were not even remotely appropriate for the position. My counterpart in DOC, the supervisor for all the DOC agents, they posted a position. They had 50 applicants. And so the comments are, the benefits are better, the pay is better, just all those things. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little picture of some of the difficulties in hiring is I'm not even getting applicants. So that's hard. At this point right now, I do not have anybody to replace that person that's leaving in September. And I think that she did great. She gave me almost 4 months' notice that she was going to leave, and I'm still not able to fill the position right away. So 2 of our officers do pretrial services, and so those are the folks that prior to sentencing, we do the praxis assessment, which I explained to you before is actually a really thorough examination of the individual before they appear before the magistrates or the judges for their bond setting. And then if somebody is released from jail, then and they have a supervisable condition, which could be GPS monitoring, alcohol or drug testing, or any other condition that we're supposed to monitor for the court. We'll supervise them until the resolution of their case. And I have 1 full-time jail alternative person. That's the one that handles the people after they're sentenced. And we place them into either residential treatment or recovery homes or home on house arrest to start addressing the underlying reasons why they're in the justice system. And then I have a compliance officer, and so she set up some monitors, all the electronic monitoring that we do. I don't want to say that she does all of that except for the GPS monitoring. So the jail alternative person and the 2 pretrial service officers monitor their own caseload. And I have a very small amount of people that I also monitor on a GPS. Our compliance officer also manages the financials because we rent out devices and we have people that pay for services, someone has to manage that money. It cannot go through the district court budget or the circuit court budget or their computer systems, how they manage their own functions, because these are not court fines and costs. Our budget for 2025 is $873,000. You can see a significant portion of that is wages and benefits. We also, like I said, have all of our electronic monitoring. The budget for this year for that was $325,000. So that is our rental cost for all of these devices through the year. That's particularly mostly self-funded, so that's not something that the tax dollars are then paying for. Whether that comes from our grant that helps pay for those services or the individuals that are running the devices. We also get revenues. I didn't put the revenue amount in because it fluctuates year to year depending on how our rental usage happens, but it's anywhere between $60,000 and $100,000 a year, so it's a significant amount that contributes towards our budget. We also, why I was here in May, is our MDOC grant. So this year was approved initially for $315,200. I requested an additional $17,000 about 3 weeks ago. I've received approval for that, so now our budget for that is $332,200 for the year. Other contributors to that budget are the Grand Traverse County contributes. I have contributors from Antrim County and Leelanau County. Our goals for our department, so public safety is our #1 requirement through our department, and that we take extremely seriously because we're monitoring usually the felony population that has actually been let out of jail and under our supervision. My next goal is to address staffing needs and adequately manage workload, and so that's the next slide that I wanted to bring to your attention. I had brought this to you at my presentation in May, but I wanted to provide some updated data about what we're looking at this year. And so in particular, as it pertains to our pretrial assessment, that's the one that we do the investigation on anybody who's going to be appearing before the magistrate and the judges. As you can see, it's had a significant increase every year for numerous years. We're projected to be over 700 for this year in the praxis assessments that we do. That is for a total of Antrim, Grand Traverse, and Leelanau. So this is not just Grand Traverse cases. And at this point, this is becoming unsustainable with the staff that I have. It is already becoming unsustainable. But for the 2026 calendar year, I've not made any requests I'm not making any requests for additional staffing, primarily because the funding for this position that I do want to ask for in 2027, I will request most of the funding for that to come through the MDOC grant. Sorry, I don't know how to go back. Anyway, so I'm going to request most of that to come through the MDOC grant. And so that has already been presented back in April to the state of Michigan. And so I have to show through that grant that we have had at least 3 years of sustained growth in order to justify to them why I need an additional position. And so it's just hasn't been something until this year that I could justify that with them with that significant growth that we've had. We need the staff now, but I'm not able to do that until 2027. So I really just wanted you to be aware of that now, of what I'm looking forward to in the future. I usually try to look several years in the future of what I'm planning for. You wanted us to look at opportunities, and since we're going to be discussing the opiate settlement funds, I thought I may as well bring this. Some of the things that I think that our department would request funding for is for supportive recovery housing. We have individuals that get out of jail, they have lost their jobs, they've lost their homes, they have nothing, and we are trying to place them somewhere. Well, we do have some housing available, but most of those housing locations require the first months. Those are recovery housing, right? So supportive recovery housing often will require the first months of housing in advance for this individual. And so I would request the first months for the individuals that are not employed and they need the assistance for that. One big problem that we come in is that when our individuals get out of jail, they've lost their Medicaid or they've lost their insurance. And one of our goals is that they get counseling set up within the first week that they get out of jail. And so if they've lost that insurance, getting them counseling and set up and they've lost their jobs and they've lost their housing, right? So we have a big ball of chaos that a person is living in at that time. And counseling is so incredibly important to assist them through that whole transition process. And so I would apply for funding to help with the counseling until their insurance is resolved. Almost every person that we work with qualifies for Medicaid or qualifies for some sort of insurance assistance. And most of our individuals are going to outpatient counseling, and that's much more affordable. This is not for residential treatment, it's outpatient counseling. The other barrier that we see to people's success in the program is drug testing and alcohol testing. Most of the individuals, I would say about 85% of the individuals we work with have a substance use disorder problem. And statistics, especially those that have been studied through the treatment courts, right? Statistics show that significant and consistent testing reduces people's consumption of illegal substances or alcohol. And so we have people that get out on our programs, they're required to test. Again, they're homeless, they're jobless, they don't have anything, and they have to go pay for drug testing, or they have to pay for alcohol testing. So the things that I would request are not a long-term ongoing request of the funds. It would be for short-term until somebody gets a job, gets a check, gets their situation sustainable. And so I think that is the end of my presentation. Questions?
Fantastic. Questions, comments, concerns? Commissioner Walter?
I've got a question about the MDOC grant. So you've been successful in getting that for many years now, sounds like.
Since 1987.
Yeah, a few years.
Yeah.
So you're, projected to apply for the grant, which would include the new position for 2027. Are you pretty confident that's going to happen? Like, what if you don't get the grant, and then
Well,
just
nothing.
talk through the process with me, because it sounds like you're going to need that position soon, but you're going to wait to the grant.
Yep.
But
I mean,
What does that
nothing's
look like?
guaranteed in a grant application.
Yeah.
I have never had an instance where I have requested funds and been denied that. Usually our application, maybe we are cut $10,000, $5,000 in our application, but I've never had anything that I've requested be denied because I have the statistics to back that up. I have the need. I can show the need for that. I have a good relationship with those who make those decisions at MDOC, and I am always, they know now that we need that position, right? So I have a grant manager. She gets my quarterly report every month, and she already is saying, like, you are definitely going to need a new position. I don't make that decision. She doesn't make that decision. She can recommend that the funding be approved. I have what's called the Community Corrections Advisory Board that I explained to you who all is on that board. There is also a state Community Corrections Advisory Board. They meet in August, and they're the ones who make the final decision of whether or not a grant application is approved. But I am a person who is always I'm already making them aware of our needs, and so it won't be a surprise that there would be a request for that. But I can't guarantee that it will be approved.
And that would be in addition to the other services that is currently covered by the grant.
It's not in addition to. I have 2 staff members, and it would be a 3rd staff member doing those same tasks. It's not going to be new tasks.
No, but I mean, the staff position itself would be an increase on top of the 300 and whatever was
Yes.
$1,000 grant. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Andrews?
Thank you. Last year, we approved a new general fund funded treatment court coordinator and a general fund funded jail diversion position.
Correct.
What benefits have you seen from those 2 positions in terms of the transition out of incarceration and into the community?
So that's a great question because, thank you for giving both of those positions. So I'll speak to the position through the jail. So the individual that has taken that position, we partner with her every single day now.
Sarah?
Sarah, we partner with her almost every single day. She goes in, so we have an individual that we need them to call. It's called the Northern Michigan Regional Entity, to call and see if they can get funded for treatment. She sits in the room with them. She helps them with their call. She helps them with answer the questions in an appropriate way, because some of them just don't know how to answer the questions that they're being asked. She facilitates paperwork getting from them to the client being able to sign releases, facilitates the phone calls then to a treatment agency. It's invaluable, that position. And so that has been wonderful. Because she has access to far more than what we've ever been able to do through the jail with that. And so that's been invaluable to us. Frankly, it's helping hobble us along a little, I guess I would say, because that's my staff usually does that kind of work. They still do that work, but now we have somebody that can help with that. As far as the treatment court coordinator, as our court administrator discussed, that position has not been able to do exactly what they were hired to do. The person hasn't, because they're taking on a caseload themselves now, as well as doing that. But I'm down in the office area where that person's office is. There wasn't a supervisor down there for the probation staff. She's down there now, able to help the probation staff, able to respond to their needs and their questions. She was able to take a caseload, right? So that's what, I'm the department head for my people. When I have someone on vacation, when I have short staff, I take the caseloads. I don't try to put that on another employee. I take that. That's what she's done. So instead of trying to overload somebody else, she has taken that on herself and done that position. I was one of the biggest proponents to the judges. My judges know I give them my opinion. Right? I was one of the biggest proponents in the need for that position, and was pushing it for years. And it is an absolutely needed position. And I think that now it's well, right, because we have somebody that's been able to help until we can get that a probation officer hired for that. But once she's able to actually do the job she was hired to do, I think we're going to see some significant changes in a positive direction.
And I'm looking at the slide, the last slide on the opioid settlement funds. Recovery housing, supportive recovery housing. Historically, has community corrections been a beneficiary of the ATS recovery houses, or were those not part of your sort of buffet of options for where you could house people?
Well, I've been here an awful long time, almost 20 years now. We used to be their sole person. We used to be their sole customer for people in recovery homes when I started. And it's kind of grown and changed. Their needs and their direction of the department of their agency through the years have changed. We have always been a significant user of their services and a amazing partner with them. And so the loss of their recovery homes has severely impacted what we can do in our jobs and where we can place people.
And what's the plan?
So for those so I have two populations, the misdemeanor population and the felony population. Through the felony population, thankfully, I have money available through MDOC that can place individuals in residential facilities throughout the state. And so we're placing people, not locally anymore, but in other facilities throughout the state. They get counseling while they're there, several different types of counseling. So if they have substance use disorder, they get that. If they need any type of anger management counseling, if they need cognitive counseling, budget counseling, all kinds of things. So they're good opportunities and they're good placements, but we're removing them from our local place, and I can place them there. For those who are in the misdemeanor population, they're not eligible for those funds. It's hard. Some of our folks are staying in jail longer than they should be staying in jail. If they have a home where in the past I may not have considered letting them move home because it wasn't a safe environment, can you go home? And then I'll try and give you extra supports to get you through it. We're sending them home on a GPS on house arrest themselves. So I don't like leaving anybody in jail that I don't feel should be there, right? That is eligible for my services. They should be able to get out and receive our services. And so it's not that we're leaving people in jail, but they are staying there longer.
Last question. Last year, we opioid settlement funds, $40,000 for drug testing.
Right.
How is that offsetting the cost? What's the benefit? Are you going to need a re-up on that? How are we getting those funds to people who, as you said, benefit tremendously from regular testing, and obviously the cost, the transport to get there is a burden. So we don't want to both benefit them, but then throw all these obstacles in their way before they can get there. So how do we get those? How are those funds getting out to the people who need them?
Let me just real quick, one little thing. You said transportation. One of the other things that we have through our department is I was able to secure a grant through 2% funding years ago for bus passes. So we have bus passes that we are able to give out to individuals to help them assist them get to testing. That is misdemeanor, felony population, probation, parole, anybody who hasn't been sentenced. I have a whole bunch. We hand those out to people through the justice system. So that's assisting with the transportation cost if it's beneficial for them. The money that was allocated through the opiate settlement funds was allocated only for those in the drug court program. And so there was that pot of money, $39,000, and what is being done with that is every individual in the drug court program, 100% of their drug testing is being paid. 50% is being paid for through the drug court grant, so they have their own grant is being paid for that, and 50% is being paid for from the allocated funds that the board gave us. We have chosen to do that to make all of those funds in both of the grant and that stretch as long as possible. And so if they are in drug court, they already are receiving all of those. They're receiving 100% of their drug testing is being paid for.
And just to be clear, there are 30 people in drug court.
There are not 30 people in drug court right now. There are, I think, 18 people in drug court.
So what about everybody else who's testing, right? I
Right.
would imagine there are more people not in drug court than in drug court,
There are.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How are we getting funds to help them with drug testing?
We're not. I'm just going to be blunt. We're not. We don't have any funds available for that. Because the opiate settlement funds were specifically for those with opiate problems, drug problems. So there's folks in sobriety court, same requirements, because the grants have the same requirements. They are required to test twice weekly when they come into the programs. Both sobriety court, both drug court, twice weekly urine screens. They're required to do at least twice daily PBTs. There is no funds assisted for those in sobriety court, and there is funds assisted for those in drug court. I do not find that that is disparate. I do not think that that's appropriate. But there isn't a pot of money to draw from for those who are in sobriety court or general probation or on pretrial bond.
So of the 39,000 in drug court testing money that we allocated to opioid last year, how much do you anticipate would be used by the end of 2025?
I think I looked at the numbers 2 months ago and we had spent approximately $8,000. And that would have been since January. So I would anticipate towards the end of the year $16,000, doubling that.
So the 39,000 we provided, it would last almost 4 years, 3 years?
At least 2 years.
At least 2 years?
At least 2 years.
But it's only supporting 18 people at this point.
It's only supporting 18 people. That program in drug court, so when you mentioned 30 people, the maximum caseload a treatment court probation officer should have is 30 people on their caseload. And so typically we have up to 30 people on the program. Right now we just don't have 30. So that money, if we were up to a maximum caseload, would not last as long as that.
But we'd get more people support.
Correct.
Any more comments or questions? Commissioner Nelson?
I just want to say that Ms. Shively, I've worked with her for 4.5 years serving on this board, and I want to thank her for when I started, how hard she worked to onboard me and get me up to speed. She makes a tough job look easy, and unfortunately, I'd also like to report that she is retiring from this job and will be leaving us. So she is one of the many employees in the county that we have that does such good work, and I just wanted to publicly recognize you and thank you for the work you've done in the last 20 years.
Thank you.
So before you run off, I have a quick question. I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Nelson, and I also agree with the sentiment. So on the, forgive me if I'm going back to something that I missed. So on your pretrial personnel, do they all share duties with Leelanau, Antrim, and Grand Traverse County? Or just the new position you're looking to fund with the MDOC grant?
So I have one individual that she is assigned to Leelanau and Antrim and Grand Traverse. And I have one individual that is assigned to Grand Traverse.
Okay.
So, not that you asked this question, but I've been asked in other boards, so what happens with community corrections if Antrim County withdraws from the district court? Nothing happens with us. We serve that population. We'll still serve that population through the circuit court. However that happens is going to be a different picture, but we would still service those individuals. And so that's why I wanted to make it clear, we're not going to have a reduction in anything if we do lose, we won't lose Antrim County, right? Our circuit court still has that. And so this individual would just do the same thing, pick up the slack in Grand Traverse County, pick up the slack in Antrim and Leelanau County. Like I said, I have one person that's assigned just to Antrim and Leelanau, but that doesn't mean she's the only one that does the work there. We are a very big cooperative team in my department, and we all just do what we need to do. So it wouldn't be anybody assigned to just a specific anything. It's just spreading out the workload even more.
Thank you, that was my next question. So, as you've said, I'm sure you've heard it many times.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for showing up today. All right, we're going to move right on to 5G, the marijuana funds. Is it going to be you, Mr.
Yeah,
Forsythe?
sure. Glad to give an introduction. So
Who's the
just
chair
to
of that committee?
just to go back, the Board of Commissioners in January created an ad hoc committee to develop a spend plan for these dollars as well as the opioid settlement dollars. Commissioners Nelson, Flynn, and Walter were part of that committee. Commissioner Walter served as chair. So the spend plan that's in your packet, the draft, comes out of the 3 meetings that were held by the work group, is really an intent to, as best as I could, memorialize the discussions. And at the last work group meeting, and at the end of May, they did recommend to the Board of Commissioners adopting the spending plan. So it's approximately 4.5 pages long. Again, I tried to, as best I could, memorialize the discussions at the meetings, including giving an overview of the funds, trying to tie these dollars to both internal and external purposes, and then give next steps. And the last page gives you a timeline for really illustration purposes of next steps and how this would be implemented. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the other ad hoc committee members and to ask them if they have any additional thoughts to share.
Sure, Commissioner Walters, you were the chair for this, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was great. We had a few good discussions. We had a lot of great community partner input. And, we definitely built on the work of the opioid task force. So it didn't replace the work that was, part of that. And we met about both, just to be clear, we met about both cannabis piece of it as well as the opioid. And sometimes the conversations would get a little bit mixed up in terms of some of the overlap and approach. But we tried to keep the process separate for both of those funds. And so it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, but they're 2 separate funds, 2 separate requirements or lack of requirements, and a different process. So, I'm assuming everybody read this information, and I'm happy to hear any questions or any thoughts from the other board members about, and maybe, we'll just start with the cannabis or marijuana piece of it, and then we can talk about the opioid after this.
Please, I think they're similar process, but they're 2 totally different things in my mind. And I did read it, I like it. Commissioner Flynn?
I will say that, we did have great conversation about this, and we did have the strategic plan a few years ago that we put into place that had, I guess, goals and objectives of the county. So I thought it was very important to bring those objectives also towards the marijuana dollars as well, to make sure that if in this process we do focus on those applications or RFPs to go towards things that help the whole community or are important to the whole county.
Yeah, just a little background then. Part of the impetus for creating this kind of an application process for distribution is to provide more transparency to the public and to this list of eligible applicants to better, we could have done anything with it, and we still can, but this is what the work group is recommending, is a more transparent, open process to help really leverage our community partners' work across our region.
Commissioner Nelson?
I just want to say, I agree with my fellow ad hoc committee members on their statements. I think it's important to note that this money, this is a tax that's coming to the county with really no strings attached. We could do anything with this money, we can do nothing with this money. So coming up with a plan, we kind of tried to narrow it down, so there's this 50-50 split. That's partly where that came from. And there was a lot of discussion. We had some really good input from some citizen members who came, some people who've been very active for a long time, some are in the audience, and I appreciate that. We're not in the business of giving out money, we're in the business of spending money. So I just want to thank everyone for their time on this. I think the plan that we've come up with, I think is a pretty good one. I've been pushing for having a very transparent application process for monies like this, and I think that we're well on the way to making that happen. So
60/40 split is not, it's for the opioid, where there's no split in the,
Oh, that's 400,000
There's-
and 500,000.
yeah, not 50-50 then, or yeah, whatever.
Page 3, it's like
Yeah, whatever the split was.
40% to the county and 50.
Yeah. And that isn't necessarily, that's not an annual, that's not in perpetuity either. That's we'll see.
I think we also wanted, we were having situations on this board where people were coming to and asking for money, and we would not know where the funds were coming from, and this is kind of sets a standard of an application process to make sure that everyone's got an equal chance.
There's no guarantee in the future of how much money. I mean, there was a large marijuana business in Michigan folded, the news this morning. We're still kind of in the wild west of this industry, so things are going to change. Who knows where we're going to be and where these businesses may or may not be located, so.
Well, to that point, Commissioner Nelson, my concern is that this money that we're getting now, we may not be getting in a year from now. So my concerns is, especially for the county side, is we're going to use this to offset budget funds, is start thinking, hey, we're going to use this in 2027 as budgeting money, like we've seen so many agencies with state and federal money this year, the counties had to kick in. All of a sudden, we're like, now we're going to do that. That gives me pause. My personal druthers that we just give it all away, and then when it goes away, we don't have any more to think. My question is, and probably for you, Mr. Forsyth, under the eligibility of applicants, we have townships that ask for money for their parks all the time. Are they eligible applicants under this proposal?
No, but they could work with a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a pretty in-depth conversation a few times about that. Partly because if another municipality wants to opt in to have cannabis businesses in their municipality, they can, and they can get the tax revenue from the state, from the people via the state through to them. And so that's why if they wanted to, like the city gets their own, I think Green Lake Township, I can't remember, there's some a couple other ones. Get some now. If East Bay or Garfield or somebody wanted to do that, they could go down that road themselves. But yeah, if they wanted to partner with one of these other eligible organizations on a project, then that would be another conversation, or it's part of the eligibility.
It was my opinion that on the ad hoc committee that governmental units would be eligible in the list under 2, but I was outvoted.
Commissioner Spence, I'll get to you.
And then I see the eligibility of applicants in the process. Is there a scoring criteria, or like, let's say there's a place of worship applies for some of this money, and then NMC applies for some of this money, and there's a finite amount. Do we have a way to give people a score from 1 to 4 in order to prioritize, like a method of prioritization of who gets limited amount of funding? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it does, and it's something we talked about at the ad hoc committee, and something we're developing right now internally.
Okay.
Scoring guidelines, primarily based on scoring guidelines we used with the ARPA dollars, a similar type weighted score, points being scored
Yeah.
if you can meet certain criteria.
So we're still kind of working through that part. Because that's where it gets tough, is how to do a method of prioritization, how to score, how to rank things, what gets measured.
Right.
Cool, thank you.
Commissioner Andrews.
So I'm going to take a 180 from the guy sitting next to me in terms of the perspective on big picture before we get into the details. Every year we get liquor tax money. Every year, it's about the same amount of money. It's $1 million. We've been getting it for a long time, and it goes straight into the general fund, consistent with state law, as I understand it. And my question for the committee or anyone is, why do we treat cannabis funds different than liquor funds?
Well, we weren't.
Discussed.
What's that?
That was, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that was
I'm
discussed.
just interested in philosophically the distinction.
I mean, the ad hoc wasn't created with the idea in mind of analyzing the liquor funds. If you want to do that, we can.
But I guess my question is, why conceptually do we treat cannabis funds as a slush fund instead of as a revenue source for the county?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I guess I never put, like, this was new dollars, so you're saying by state, we have to put the liquor tax in our general fund. That's not a requirement for the marijuana dollars.
That is accurate. So this was discussed at the committee level. You know, we brought up the fact that when we are starting to contemplate debt service over the coming years, we've said this is a pot of money that is just unrealized in terms of any other revenue source for the county. We could use that. What this group discussed was they understood that. They recognized the value to that, but they also recognized the value added to providing community requests and adding to the community as well and benefiting the community with these funds versus strictly using it for a revenue source for the county.
This group has been funding through a more shoot from the hip kind of method where groups are being funded. This was one option to do that with a little more transparent and structured system.
And
Yeah, we did
I
discuss
think we all
this.
appreciate that, and I think this reflects that. And I'm personally willing to give this a try because I think that's the direction we're going, and I think it's worth doing. But I do think philosophically, it's a question. Anytime we're treating cannabis differently than liquor tax, it raises a flag for me. They're both coming from addressing similar vices or disorders, or however you want to put it. And in particular, the second county goal in our strategic plan is, as we've heard over and over today, is to recruit and retain qualified staff for the county. And one aspect of that is funding, and having a source of funding that directly addresses recruitment and retention of county employees would be a priority for me. But moving forward, I am curious a couple of specifics about the project. One is the indication is that applications under 25,000 would be, I forget how it was termed, sort of unconditional.
Yeah,
But subject to the requirements described. So I'm just not sure what you get for only applying for 25,000 and why it's different than 27,000.
So we talked about this at the committee level, and the one thing we learned administratively is difficulties managing the ARPA grant process, where you don't try to define minimum, maximum amounts and put conditions where appropriate on the funds. So 25,000, the idea there is that's a grant. You get those funds in advance. Everything beyond that, though, is reimbursement basis, and that comes through just learned experience with the ARPA funds, where the ARPA funds, we wanted them to be reimbursable, but we did have many grantees come to us and say, well, can you convert that to more of that advance fund? So this is just, you write the rules however you want. Our thought was we just have a clear process with clear guidance up front to everybody.
Part of the approach of that is that, a lot of smaller organizations perhaps don't have the upfront money to
Yeah.
be reimbursed. So it gives us the flexibility to have a minimum amount that we can front for them versus all reimbursement. So it allows for the flexibility of different kinds of applicants more than, and yeah,
Right.
it's maybe complicating it, but I think it helps a lot of different organizations achieve their goals.
Commissioner Walters, right, we're not trying to create a bureaucracy here. We
So,
have enough of that.
but then in paragraph 6, it says that, so there's a question of do you get the funds before or after spending? But then there's also a requirement that all documents, that the applicants must document all before and after activity related to the funds. Is that not required for the smaller grants, or is that for all applicants? I'm looking at paragraph 6 on page 4 where it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I would like an
And-
update or information about every grant.
okay, so the only distinction on 70, on the 25 is that you get it up front. Everything else applies. That's the only distinction. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
that
because we
makes sense.
want to hear about the project and hear about the activity and give them an opportunity to tell their story as well
Okay.
along the way.
So, yeah, smaller organizations asking smaller amounts of money might not have the infrastructure to
Yeah.
be able to comply with some of this in a timely fashion. My only other concern is the application approval. I'm all about the application review and having the committee do that, but I think the application approval should be brought to the board in the concept of this is the procedure, this is what we're doing, and it's something that can be done in the consent decree. Doesn't have to be big, but I think as people that are elected to represent the people in the county, we should be the ones approving who does and doesn't get the money. I imagine in my mind it'd be probably a pretty straightforward process in the, the spirit of we want to be open in the process, which I 100% agree with your guys' comments on that. I think you've done great work on this, but I think it should be brought to us and not to just a couple of us and a few selected people out in the public for the final approval of the funds to be distributed.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's similar to the 2% grants. They, it goes through a complete vetting process before it comes to us. And it's, I mean, I can't even remember one that was denied at that point. It feels like it's more of, I don't know. It feels like it's just a process thing that doesn't have a lot of value, except it does bring more exposure to the grants that are going out. So I would be okay with that change.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because when we talk about cannabis funds, that's exactly my thought process was the 2% grants the tribe gives out. It's like, this is money that we're giving out, because I think of even though we get it in a similar fashion to liquor tax, it's not pigeonholed by statute, and I don't think, in 100 years from now, if we're still getting it, that might be something, or even 20 years from now, I don't necessarily believe this is going to stay the way that it is. And so my big concern is that we're going to start putting that as part of our budget. I do agree with Commissioner Andrews that we're looking at some big expenditures here, and we've pretty much told everybody we're not giving you any money unless you go through a process.
Right.
So, and here's your process. And so I think it should probably, it's $900 some odd thousand a year approximately. Just give it all away till it.
The reason that it came up this way is because it's not a one-time $900,000 grant, it's smaller grants, and I'm not saying it shouldn't come to this board, but we are trying to have it be a process that just goes through and is less political, doesn't necessarily need to rise to the level of this full board and take up the time of the commissioners. But
Well, I think some statute, it's going to be required for us to spend money, that we all have to approve it, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think we can't just farm it all out, that 3 people say, hey, we're going to give away $75,000 as a group, and that's a done deal. I think legally, we have to do it.
so.
can't answer that question.
The way it's written in paragraph 5, the work group would go through the process with administration of scoring, selecting, creating an agreement, but only then does it come to us for approval and authorization. So
approved
what?
resolution.
So so there's 2 differences that I see between what's being proposed versus what the 2% grant does. When we see a 2% grant application, right, we get them from time to time, and there's like 12 of them in our packet, and we generally consent calendar them all and move them through. The difference is that after we approve it, it then goes to a department at the tribe, who then has the much harder job of sorting through more demand than there are limited resources. And so that's going to be the work group, right? The concept is that all happens at the work group. And I think that's going to be a much harder process once this actually plays out, because I can't think of any nonprofit, place of worship, private school, charter school, that's not going to meet the goals, right? Planning for growth, meeting needs of the community, like everybody in the community will be applying for these funds. And frankly, they're all going to apply for $25,000 so that they can have the least, right, oversight or process. But, so then that work group's going to have an incredibly difficult time making those decisions, in my opinion. My view is, and I'm willing to try this, right? Like, let's do something. It's better than what I think we're doing right now. I think that, to Commissioner Seifert's point, all of that should come to us as recommendations, not as here's the agreement.
I was seeing it as coming for recommendations as well.
Yeah, the group would bring their final recommendations.
Okay, so paragraph 5 should probably be amended, because that's not what it says. It says the approval is happening at the work group, and
Well, as you go into it further, it kind of says two things. It says that the work group's going to approve all applications, and you read that, and you're saying, well, if I'm going to give you an application, that means I get the money, right? But then you get down on the bottom, that says it's going to be terms and conditions for the use of the funds, and the agreement has to be approved by the BOC and authorize the BOC chairperson to execute. So that actually, in my reading, is fundamental, people. Starts right here. I think that may be a little cleaning up, but I concur that the work group is going to have a pretty good workload, but that does satisfy my concerns about that. I mean, you guys did a lot of good work here.
I'm going to push back.
Word, but I don't know that. I mean, it isn't. Maybe it just needs some wordsmithing to not say approval, but to form a recommendation to the full board.
I mean, my view is that it should come to this board for approval, and I think that's what I'm hearing everyone thinks. Well, but it says it looks like the work group will adopt a motion approving the application, and then they bring forward and then they get an agreement, and then we just sign off on the agreement. So by the time it gets here, it's already been approved. We're just
We're trying to prevent a big discussion here that you've got a group that has vetted, done the things, you have this is.
I think
wordsmithing it to form a recommendation.
If we mess up, we should all be responsible for that. And if we get it right, we should all right? Like, I think the ultimate approval should not be on the work group, it should be on this board.
Well, it has to be anyway, I think, fundamentally, the execution of.
Yeah, no,
And I think
it's just a bit of wordsmithing, because I see how you read that, and it's not how I
we
read that.
can get Matt to clean that up for us.
Yeah, I think it's just
Because,
recommendation
I mean,
and then
if we don't want to
approval
sign the
and execution.
agreement when it comes here, then we're formally not
I think we're all on
expecting
the
to.
same page.
It's just
We
like
just
that.
need
I
to-
It's
think
just
so.
like interviews. It's a recommendation, and then this board approves it.
Yeah, I think that's.
Well, I mean, a work group doesn't have the authority to execute a contract anyway, so.
Right.
Well, but if all we're seeing is the final agreement after it's already been negotiated, it's not much of an approval at that point.
Well, it
It's
says
pro
in there
forma.
that it's, in here it says they have to provide all of that stuff.
Yeah.
If it's of applications reviewed, that the people that
I
are
think we're
applying.
just talking in circles and
We
we all
are.
agree.
We are.
I guess what I just don't want to see is the same document come back next week for approval without an amendment.
I think
Yeah, we're good, and
they understand.
thanks for not pointing out a couple spelling mistakes I caught, so.
You got to read it first before you can get the spelling
Reading my
mistakes,
name.
Chris. I didn't see any spelling mistakes.
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Forsyth for his help on this. He's been a great resource, and really
No, I
appreciate your clarity. You brought the experience of the ARPA, as you discussed already, but thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Can I suggest that whatever is brought to us for approval includes a requirement that we review it after the first year? Just so that we build in a date to look at how this worked and assess it. I am assuming the same work group that developed it gets the joy of sitting on the work group.
Self-reflection.
You can't
No
appoint
good deed.
in
No good
advance,
deed.
We're gonna
but
need
that's fine.
$25,000 to conduct that study.
There you go. Commissioner Speck.
So Commissioner Andrews had asked about retaining a portion of this for employee retention, which I think is a fair ask, but I didn't see that in the document. So
It's in there. It's in paragraph 2 that there's a 2-track.
the planned purpose?
Well,
I'm sorry,
it
it
just
was-
is, it just says that it's for, basically,
Sustainable
Sorry.
growth and innovation
Three-
to recruit and retain qualified staff. Okay.
Yeah, 3A is where the split is.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's for 2025, the Department of Treasury will, and then it says 400,000 internally and 500,000 for distribution.
Okay, and that's when we were talking about the split. Okay, in a
So-
percentage way.
So then
Okay,
the
that's
question
good.
is, I think to your point, can we prioritize any of the 400,000 for retention? I feel like that's probably a next year question, not a this year question, because we've already got a plan for that 400,000, but
I
I
see.
think
Well, and also, it sets you up for failure, because what if the $400,000 doesn't exist anymore, but we're spending it on retention? So who's going to decide who gets laid off?
And I think it's.
Because that's what,
I
that's what's the reality of it is.
Why don't we put it in percentages instead of figures?
Again, we don't have the percentages. Who in the board's going to decide who gets laid off? We don't have the money to pay for all those people.
I mean, so
Our
to be
first duty
clear,
is responsibility to taxpayers.
I'd say
then
the chair
by
guy.
by that theory, then all of this funding should go into the county, whereas your perspective is that none of it should go to the county. So if we wanted to reduce our millage, we would put all of this money in the general
That's a lot of
fund.
hoops. Well, we'll vote on it next
But
week to find
I
out.
think this is a good process to get us started.
Mm-hmm.
so.
Commissioner
yeah, maybe
Nelson.
we keep it, go ahead.
Let's not take a subcommittee, ad hoc committee that deals with marijuana and undermine administration and this board by talking about salary increases from possibly 37 different departments. I think there's a different mechanism to make that happen, and it's not through the marijuana
Well
funding
put.
committee. That would be not very helpful to administration.
Let's wrap this up then,
Well-
on that happy note.
Maybe we just keep it more general then, instead of, we're recommending a portion of it be used internally and a portion of it, we're saying $500,000 to disperse to external agencies, et cetera, through the application process. Maybe we remove the very specific things that internally we're going to use this for, and we can have a further discussion on that another time.
I mean, I would support using it on the capital improvement plan, because by definition, those are one-time spending projects, and we have an infinite supply of them. And
Right.
rather than leaving this completely open-ended, which then just
That's
dumps
much
it
more
back in the
appropriate.
general fund, I would just say put in the capital improvement fund.
Much more
But you were
appropriate.
just talking about employee retention. so I'm not-
But I also said that would be a year too, because I think
Oh,
too,
got
it
it,
would be
okay.
hard to, by next week,
Got it.
have the language that
Okay, so keep it as is. then.
keep it as is, and then in the future, we could talk to Commissioner Spence's
Yeah,
concern.
and just to wrap it up, because I heard a comment, I don't want to sound dismissive of the importance of these programs. Like, they're very important. But in order to have very important programs, we have to have a vibrant staff that feels valued and respected at the county. And so I brought it up because I just want to see that balance. Today, we heard so much about just employee retention, and we can't get good things done if we don't have good people. So just for wherever that comment came from in the audience, I just want to say, hey, I care. We all care. We want to make sure that these funds are distributed in the best possible way, but we also have to take care of the people that are responsible for working for the county.
100% agree. Anything else? All right,
Here's Mud Administration.
we'll figure it out. Or they'll
Fun
figure it
part.
out, and we'll
So-
vote on it.
And we're going to vote on this next week. That's the
Yeah, that's the plan. Unless Matt says something he's got to check on. All right, so let's move on to the opioid settlement funds, 5H. Commissioner Walters, you want to tee it up for Mr. Forsythe and
Or
whoever else is
Chris,
involved?
do you want to give an intro on kind of where we landed with this? And
Yeah.
you can chime in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like with the marijuana funds, similar concepts were discussed, 2 tracks. But versus the marijuana funds, There is a lot more process involved, and there's assistance from the Community Foundation. And ultimately recognizing that the opioid crisis is really a public health emergency. Really, the health department should be involved in planning and writing the spend plan. So Mike Leahy, interim health director, he is here, who did a lot of the heavy lifting. And again, thanks to the committee members as well, have provided really great comments and insight. And before we turn it to Mike, I just want to go over the numbers of the amounts of settlement funds we have received, we will receive, because the numbers as of yesterday changed to the positive. So in addition to, let's say, approximately 300,000 funds we're going to start receiving end of this month through the summer from distributors, there is also recently announced Kroger. So we settled with Kroger over a year ago. Kroger will make 2 payments of $13,000 each within the next few months. And if you've read the news, Purdue Pharma has reached a global settlement of $7.4 billion. We don't have the details yet of what that means for Grand Traverse County. We're still waiting to get that information from council. The long and the short of it is, right now, through 2038, we'll get $5.8 million approximately. That amount's going to grow, we anticipate, with the announcement of the Purdue Pharma settlement. So with that, that's just an overview of the funds received and we will receive. And so I'm happy to turn it over to Mike at this point.
Hello, good morning. Still morning, right? Mike Leahy, the Public Health Department, as noted. I was taking some notes from the previous conversation, so I'm already seeing some potential edits to this document presented here. But really, I think this has been presented, and it was, if there's questions on it, or I can walk through it.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thanks, Mr. Leahy. You've also done a lot of work and put what we were trying to say into a document that is very comprehensive. This, I just wanted to state, per our last conversation, this is a court award. It's a reimbursement for a loss. It's damages. This could also, I sat next to the Attorney General at a meeting here in this building. There are not a lot of strings attached to this money either. You know, we could just kind of throw it in, but the feeling is that we're going to try to help fix the crisis that was created by the situation. So we're trying to come up with a plan that works and is transparent for everybody, and how we can help make our community better.
Commissioner Walner?
Yeah, just a little, this is a little different in that, and Mr. Forsythe shared that we would like to bring in the expertise of the Community Foundation, not to manage the funds as an endowment, but to help with the granting process, because this is what they do every day. And we know that the county is not, we don't have the resources, and we're not in a good position to really play that role in this.
And some thought towards sustainability of this program ongoing.
But they're not part of the selection process. They're more of the reporting process.
I'm curious how we don't have the capacity to do that in-house.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't the health department have some capacity to do that in-house?
So this is a question that I've been kind of reflecting on at our own health department since just meeting with the work group. And I think the Community Foundation provides some benefit there, but I will say, having discussed internally with our administrative team, I do think we can do some of this work. This is work that we do as a department. We, as I present budgets to you, we receive grant dollars. We adhere to that language. Our team just put together a pretty comprehensive RFP that's going to be presented to this board here next meeting. I think we can pull this together, and having rallied that crew just recently to ask him that difficult question, I was very, I feel confident in the response. So I appreciate the comments made about this being a public health emergency, and that's where that originated. I appreciate that it's not entirely a public health emergency at this point, but it did originate as a public health emergency, and if the health department is in a position to take a leadership role in the distribution of those funds, whether internal departments or external departments, I don't only just think it's appropriate, but I think we're positioned to do so.
Well, we had many conversations in the committee, and the feedback we got directly from administration was that they did not have the capacity internally to manage it. And that's when we brought in the Community Foundation at a couple meetings to talk through what they could bring to the process, which in some ways is good. It's not political. It's a whole other entity that understands community problems, community partners, is in it every day. So that's why we're recommending that. This is the first time I've heard that you're interested in that.
Yep, that's the first time.
So,
I mean, if the funding is not going to the Community Foundation, I guess we're keeping the funding. Well, let me ask that. Can we keep this in a separated fund that it's interest generating so that it can sustain its sustainability? Is that something that was talked about, or is that something that we have that option, right?
all of our funds are interest.
No, but the
No.
interest goes into the general fund. If the interest from these funds can go back into these funds, then these funds can be more sustainable over time. That's how the endowment would work at the Community Foundation if we gave them these funds, right?
It would not
No,
be
no,
an
no, we
endowment
never-
because the Attorney General is against
cannot have an
endowment.
Right, but we can hold these funds in an interest-bearing account, right? We can? Right, Dean?
We currently have the funds in a separate fund. They're not commingled with, like the circuit court fund or the general fund. They are not accruing or earning interest at this point because all of the interest on those dollars that are managed by the county treasurer are being retained by the general fund. There's no requirement that I'm aware of that we have to accrue interest on those funds for the.
Right, but if we wanted to, right? If we wanted to make this a fund that's sustainable for longer than just the life of the money, right? Like if we wanted to treat it as an endowment for a much longer term, I mean, we're talking millions of dollars sitting in the bank that's generating hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The short answer would be yes. You would not set it up, though, as an endowment fund. It would just be a fund for accounting purposes, and the discussion of whether or not we would allocate or distribute interest earnings to that fund is something that we should discuss with the treasurer.
Yeah, we did talk about that at the last meeting. I don't think Mr. Bott was there to confirm or deny that that was possible, but we were hopeful that we could do that.
Okay, so we're all on the same page that we'd like the interest to go back into the pot as opposed to going into the general fund.
Yes.
Conceptually,
Conceptually,
Yes.
hypothetically?
hypothetically?
That's a discussion point. I'm not ready to say yes or no on that. I'm not against it, but I think that's a discussion we would have.
I think there needs to be some more information on that, but we can't make any determination today, but we can certainly think about a path to get information on.
And I would say that would be an important discussion to hear in regard to my previous response, right? So I do, why I thought the foundation was an interesting approach was because I'm looking at this on behalf of building program, right, and building sustainable program. So using some dollars in 25 to put something together for 26, but also looking at that program and say, we will be able to do this in 28, 29, 30. I don't want to put together a program in which then we pull that out of the community when these funds go away, and these funds will go away. We need that kind of pot to be able to say, this is how we're going to support this program in 2030, 2031, all the while we're building a program that has fees and generates revenue, whether it's capturing from Medicaid dollars or wherever it may be, so that we can stand those programs up through a combination of fees. So we do need that pot, and the original proposal from Foundation, I think, provided that, some other strings there, but I think it's really important to consider that.
Commissioner Nelson?
I guess I'd like to hear from administration and Mr. Leahy, not today, but for you guys to have a conflab and talk about the benefits or not of having the Regional Community Foundation involved. So, because that is news to us, and I think we'd like to hear this is not our decision, more decision of administration. Is that a fair
Well,
request?
but we did
Mr.
establish it
Relker?
as 2 tracks specifically so that it was kind of, the decisions weren't made internally for everything. And that was there, the track 1 is the internal spending, and that's kind of
Yeah.
where you come in more in a very specific role. And then the track 2 is for the community foundation to help disperse funds with our community partners.
And I think both tracks can continue to exist. It's just the, how those Track B funds are made available to the public. I think that committee could still exist. But in terms of actually making those proposals public for then those private or community partners to apply to in receiving those grants, reviewing them, that can all still exist under a change if we so choose to go that way. I think that's an important piece to Track B. That's why Track B is there, is to hear from our community partners that do things within the 5 pathways that we just don't do as county departments. And we need that input in that decision-making process.
Yeah.
So did you comment that you're going to have an RFP for us, or a proposal next week?
Not for this.
Not for this, no, for another item, but it did change things internally a bit in terms of our administrative team and how we operate.
I believe for just more understanding of the concept of utilizing the community foundation to be basically help with the grant process. I believe it's like a 1.5% grant administration fee or something like that. So it's really a not entirely significant amount of money that we would be contracting out versus using internal resources for, which I still think it's a better idea than in that Track B anyway.
1.5%?
I believe
Commissioner
that's what she said, 1.5%.
Okay.
Is that right, Mr. Forsythe,
That-
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's only,
yes. I think so, yeah.
So let's say, because just to right, so we decide that in 2026, for 2026, we're going to distribute a certain amount, right? Not all of it, per se, maybe 200,000 through Track B. Somehow we come up with a number. Then does the community foundation get 1.5% of that 200,000, or do they get 1.5% of the entire sum of money that's in the pot?
No, the administration of grants.
So
Only
if
the
we only
200,000.
give them 30,000, if we're only distributing 30,000, then they only get
Yeah.
1.5% of that. Okay.
Commissioner Nelson, I'm
So,
sorry.
So,
Hold
go-
on.
oh,
sorry, yes.
well, go ahead and finish, because
Well,
I'm changing a little bit, so.
You're perplexed.
No, I was just following the numbers. That was it.
I was, that we were on a
Math
track
flex,
here, and I was, Dr. Graham has been very involved in this process from the beginning of the committee, and he had his hand up, and I don't know if you would recognize him, or,
We're going to do second public comment right after this, so I'm going to
okay,
wait.
all right.
I did see you. If there was somebody else here after this, then I would certainly, because we're not making any decisions today. Things would be a little different if we were voting on something today. He'll get his chance.
Okay,
So-
thanks.
So
Thank you for pointing it out, but I did see that.
I don't see it. If it's here, I might have skimmed over it, but we have a pot of money. We've got known funds. We've got known coming funds. And I understand the 60-40 split. Conceptually, I'm good with that, but how much money are we giving away next, you know what I mean? Like, what is the proposal to figure out, and this goes to a sustainability approach, right? Like, is that something that was discussed at the ad hoc, or is that something we still need to discuss as a board or from recommendations?
I think we need to still discuss that, but at the same time, I'm pretty eager to get as much as we possibly can out to start mitigating the issues at hand.
Well, I can appreciate that, but this isn't a lot of money.
I know, but
And it'll be gone very quick if
I
I don't have
understand.
any skin in the game.
I
and
just
get
said as much as we
1.5%.
possibly can, is what I said, not all of it.
Smart distributions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but at the
I
same
think
time,
we-
they have to, make an impact. And, the problem to me with an endowment or an endowment even philosophy approach is that we're in a crisis situation, and I don't necessarily want to be, just spending a little bit every year so that we can stretch out the money for 20 years or something. To me, it's like we need to front load it to tackle the problem and help with prevention and help with the issues that are currently created, not like, well, we're going to want to
Sprinkle
stretch this
here.
out for 20 years. Like, that's not the philosophy that I have going into this.
So,
Make our programs robust so we don't have this crisis in 20 years.
So it's a blend in my mind, right? So this epidemic originated and was declared in 2003. It started in the early 90s, right? How we are going to solve this in our community, which is it's a big solve, and it's not just us as the county who is going to solve that, is attacking those upstream issues. I heard housing, transportation. Those are longevity problems in our community that building sustainable program that addresses those will chip away at year after year. So rushing out the door and spending a significant amount of money to a community partner that does a great job at what they do, while it will make an immediate impact in 26 or 27, one of the key philosophies in the MAC tool and the strategy at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services was don't spend all the money all at once in the same place. Create program within the community that will address housing, will address transportation. We do some of these things already. We have a program, Community Connections, that addresses transportation, addresses how a community member can not just get to the health department to get their WIC benefits or address their mental health appointment, but also get to their next appointment in the rest of the week. When I asked a team member this week of the clients that we see at the health department related to our mental health appointments, what percentage would you say substance use disorder is an identified issue within the home? The response to me was 75%. So we're already doing this work. And that's the public health just in me, right, is we can rush out the door and do a couple things, but we want to build some program that we can assure is here in 23, 25, because this problem is still going to be here in 2020, 2030, right, 2035. We can make improvements on it and chip away at it, and I think this is a good nest egg to start at that.
Any more comments, questions, or concerns? Mr. Leahy, do you have anything to add?
Mr.
Alger,
Andrew has
Mr.
something to
Forsythe?
say.
What's next?
Well, Dr. McGrath's been very patient. I thought we would go to,
Oh,
if
I'm
there's
just-
nothing else to say, we're
I
going
mean,
to,
are we presenting this for approval next week?
So like I said, yeah, I do have
That's
that.
why it's on here.
potentially, but I see that there's a lot of questions, and so I'm thinking it may not be next week, but the meeting after that.
You were going to do some more edits on it, so should we just wait until next?
Well, I think to Commissioner Nelson's point, I think we have to have a conversation around foundation versus internally, right? And that would edit track B and then to be presented to this board here.
And it also sounds like there's a question for the treasurer, who I know is just ridiculously busy in this moment, that we should probably be asking his opinion on some of it too.
He's not the treasurer.
No, he means the treasurer.
Oh, you
I
mean
said the treasurer, didn't I?
You did, but you were looking at Dean, so I wasn't sure what you were doing.
I always value Mr.
Well,
Bean's,
we-
or Mr.
we-
Dunbar's opinion.
The issue there is, okay, your general fund receives that interest, which, it's an allocation that we do annually. Can we add the Fund 284, which is the fund that houses the opioid funds, to that distribution? The answer is yes, we can do that. Those funds then are not available in your general fund, which supports everything that this board does. So it's a distribution of that interest earnings to another fund. Absolutely, we can do it. It's not necessarily maybe the treasurer's decision. That probably is a board decision. But the point I want to make is those are funds then that you don't have that interest revenue in your general fund to operate. You're allocating it someplace else. So it's not my decision to do that. We only allocate those dollars to a few funds that are required for us to do that, and we've really limited that to keep that interest in the general fund. That's the reason Most of the interest is retained by the general fund. We do allocate interest to the medical care facility, the pavilions, because they're part of our cash balance, and there are a few funds that are restricted, but at least wanted you to have that information.
So interest is one of 10 sources of revenue for us, but my understanding is these dollars are not currently laying in an interest-bearing account.
No, they're part of, in our entire fund structure, we have what's called common cash. The funds are invested. They're probably in our Michigan class account. They are earning interest. That interest is retained currently by the general fund.
So I have another question, which is, I think how I read this is that the community foundation, the proposal is that the community foundation would make the decision. It would never come to this board for approval. If I'm reading the
So that is one of the projected edits that I had mentioned just listening to the last conversation, is I think there can be language in here drafted that those determinations be presented to this board as recommendations, just listening to the conversation from the marijuana funds.
Well, isn't that also required by law?
I mean, we're spending
I mean,
public money, right?
it's public money.
I don't recall that being discussed to be like that. I thought everything was coming to this board.
We agree that everything should come to this board
It was
as a
like a work
recommendation.
group we were-
But that's not,
Yeah,
but that's not how you're, yeah.
okay. And then another question I have is the spending committees. I guess I view commissioners as necessary to both and health department as necessary to both committees. It seems like we wouldn't want the health department not having a window into the track B, because to the extent most of the opioid task force money is being spent there, there should be some understanding of what's going on over on this side with these funds, so that they're collaborative and not duplicative or not, I just got to believe having a window, eyes on both tracks from both the commissioners, because we're approving the spending, and from the health department, because you're a key part of both pieces is necessary. I also am not quite understanding what it means to have the task force, the opioid task force, on the spending committee, because that was a group of about 12 very diverse representatives. So what does that mean, to have a group of 12? Are they all on?
No,
just
that
like
needs
not,
clarification.
Like the board is not,
Yeah.
we're not all on
Right.
it. It was,
But
A
who?
representative,
I mean-
a representative, so that's clarification in language.
But there were very diverse perspectives there. Wouldn't we want to identify the perspective we're looking for? I mean, the sheriff was on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, yeah.
representative of the courts, representative.
Courts, right? Like, that was intentionally a set of perspectives that we put together in a room. So to just say, put one person, that seems like that would be a challenge. It seems like we want the courts. It seems like we want, well, and they're on A. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me to have the whole task force have one person on that committee.
Okay.
We should try to identify the perspective we're trying to gain.
Oh,
So as a path forward, what I'm hearing is some discussion about track B specifically, if it is necessary to use the community foundation, or can we do those things in-house? It is relatively new that Mr. Leahy has said we can do this in-house. I think when we talked administratively at the committee meeting, we were speaking about our office. We don't have the capacity to manage those operations. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, but if there are additional edits that have to go into this document to come back to this board for approval, we could take those now, or we could take those through suggestions from email to us to see, like just what Commissioner Andrews just brought up, who on the opioid task force, and how are we going to make those decisions, and who is going to be included in that.
yeah. It does say include a representative of each entity
Okay.
identified right
All
above
right,
that.
okay.
Well,
Step from
and
me. Yeah.
just looking at, there's different desires to spend the money for track A and track B. But to Commissioner Andrews' belabored point, I think, that was a long way around the barn. Why don't we have just one spending committee?
Yeah,
It's
Those are
like,
two different,
I understand that in this plan,
internal and external.
but there should be probably one and saying, this is the money we're spending for A and this is the money we're spending for B, for the reason that collaborative effort. We've sat in here when we talk about the homelessness task force, which is made up of 20 different people, and they want 20 different things, and some of them are duplicative. And they all want money. And the same thing for some of the folks that have asked for opioid task force, or opioid funds. They're doing duplicative services, and they don't work together. This pot is finite.
It seems like there's a lot of overlap between the committees, and having one committee you could still have track A spending and track B spending,
But just one committee that's made up with,
but otherwise you're going to 2 meetings. Administration's going to 2 meetings, health department's
It'll
going
be
to 2
4
meetings.
meetings by the
They're
time
going to
you
be
get there.
very duplicative, they're going to be very overlappy. Sorry, I'm belaboring further my point, apparently.
Well, just clarification of the process. I mean, the process is different in that, you know, it is a different process. The spending committee for external is more of a granting process where you're reviewing grants. The internal one isn't like a grant process where you're reviewing grants. Those are two different approaches. And I'm not saying that that's why it's helpful to have people on both who understand what's going on. I don't know that you need to have the same group of people because and it's two different timelines too. It's not like you're deciding all of it at the same time. The grant process is designed to be set up differently.
that may be the case, but wouldn't you also agree that the end result is still the same? How we're trying to spend that money is to reach out and to help deal with the opioid crisis. To have 2 different groups spending their pot of money that aren't communicating together, even though it's a different timeline and it's a different process, they could all be one committee working together. And I'm not saying picking the A committee over the B committee. I think a blend of the two, that's going to have a much more collaborative and hopefully, much more successful
I think
accomplishment.
listening to public comment in our ad hoc committee was that the internal would be for the internal departments to decide what is needed in those departments that are already working towards this crisis. And then the track B was more community members and important people like Mr. Friedman or other folks that understand the community as a whole.
I understand that, but my
So
point,
I understand overlap, but it's definitely 2 different processes.
but helping the public is not. It's, if I'm dealing with somebody who's an addict from opioid, and I'm in and out of the jail, and we're taking money for this, and then we're trying to do an outreach program on that, and we're not communicating, and we're not spending our money together.
I understand
we're-
overlap, I'm just saying that that's the reason there was 2 different committees.
I understand that.
created in the
I'm
first place.
proposing an alternative for the sake of efficiency of staff time.
I understand. I'm
And it's
just,
a multiplier for success. 2 people working at opposite ends with the same pot of money is not a successful recipe.
they're
Never
2
has
different
been.
pots, because it's going to be split up.
Same pot.
No,
I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith.
I've been waiting a long time. So I think a prioritization matrix would be essential for preventing a duplication of efforts or similar, different organizations doing the similar, looking for the similar actions based on a limited amount of money. I'm not an expert in making prioritization matrices, but I have done them, and I think that they're very successful, and it also adds to the transparency, and everybody can see how it came about. So that's my first point.
that's in here, by the way.
Okay, and then second point is, I just want to say thanks for the 5 core values. I think those are really critical. You know, I think that they help loop back the purpose of people's asks and how we're going to spend this money. And I also think that we really need to table this and come back to it at the next study session. And maybe that's obvious, but there's a lot to go with this, and you put a lot of work into it, and I'd be happy to revisit it. That's all.
I agree. Any more comments, concerns for Mr. Leahy or
So just I do want to bring up, there is a determination rubric that's included in here, and a lot of this was brought to the committee. Commissioner Flynn was really good about reminding us that the MAC resources that were put together related to this are really good, and so that she helped us to make sure that that was incorporated, so it is right here in the document.
And I concur that this will be a lot, I think, in a sense, easier because of those points that you've included in here than the cannabis work group, which lacks very clear guidance that is here. So I think those are attributes.
Well, good. I think that rubric will help alleviate some of the things that we've been concerned about. Some of them.
Well, in summation, I'd like to thank everybody for their work, especially the ad hoc committee, Director Leahy, people from the public, opioid task force. This is something we've been talking about for a long time, talk about process. We've been kind of shooting from the hip to land. This is a monumental amount of work that you guys have accomplished. Regardless of what the end product looks like, it's damn fine work by all involved, and I thank you for doing that. Because you aren't going to get the recognition for it that you guys truly deserve for doing all the hard work of putting this together. And that's the truth. So, you all set, Director Leahy?
Thank you.
Thank you. So, all right, so we're going to move right along to second public comment. Dr. McGram, you've been very patient with us. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts. Dave McGram, member of the Opioid Epidemic Task Force from Garfield Township. A couple of thoughts on the two committees, or the Track A, Track B. That model can work. You've got an overlap with a county administrator on each committee, and I would assume Mr. Leahy from the Health Department on each committee, so I wouldn't see that there would be a lack of communication between those committees. Mr. Leahy also has some things in his document, like the annual spending plan, which to me means a look at priorities for spending. So I'm looking at both of those committees, seeing that document before the next cycle of grants or the next cycle of the county budget. And they can talk, look it over, but I don't see Track A, that group, going down this road, and Track B going down another road. I see common goals and needs and a community interest being met by both, but the county has to meet a lot of those needs. So I think the model with A and B is okay. It could be one big committee, but it could also work as both. I also think, and I'm not necessarily putting a plug in for the foundation, but I think it's a sound model. They know how to get grant applications done. And I would say the health department probably dabbles in that. But when you're opening it up to the entire public with selection criteria, that's what they do. And the 1.5%, to me, you're not going to find a department that's going to be able to do it for that. So I would like to not rule that out yet. I also, the selection criteria were mentioned, and there was a draft out there that Mike has seen, and it hasn't been put out there yet, but that would be added work that needs to be done and could be brought back fairly quickly. My hope is that this doesn't take another month or two, that some things can be changed and move forward to the board. We've been doing this for 2 years. So keep a deadline out there. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Oh, but thank you for all your work on this.
Thanks for
your comments.
letting me participate.
Any more public comment?
Dave Friedman, Garfield Township, also opioid epidemic task force member, and have been at most of the meetings except for the last one, unfortunately, the death of my family, and wasn't able to be there. So when I read the current document, I was surprised by the 60-40, which seemed to come from, I didn't know where, because it had never been spoken about before. It seems to be an artificial barrier It could be 70/30, it could be the other way around. Where the needs are, the needs are. I also appreciate the empathetic approach to services that has been displayed throughout this meeting. I think it's important that the community is going through growing pains, and we need to pay attention to the people that live here. There's a couple things about the process that I think are important. One is that the sheriff, who is also part of county, had a top voted project, the QRT, in the original approval of the opioid epidemic task force as a needed process, a needed project. I think that's important to keep in mind as we go forward. The other is time is essential. We need to get this money out. People are dying. I get that. There is a monitoring piece that should be built in, and I don't know if you want to, but health department could hire a person, just like we hired a consultant originally, to actually put this all together and work on the sustainability piece. I think I got it all. I'll take any questions. This has been done in other communities. I've been a member of committees that actually were affiliated with the county, made decisions on a larger amount of money, and then the county would actually distribute the dollars and track them. So I'll take questions or meet with people individually, but those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your work on this project as well as your comments. Public comment.
Harold Lasser, Acme. I wanted to comment that the footballing around of the FOIA seemed a little strange as a member of the public looking at my tax dollars. There should be a principle. You allocated money to the prosecutor for FOIA. If you move the FOIA, you ought to move the money, right? And separate subject, does FOIA require more money? But where the FOIA should go should simply be a matter of who does it the most efficiently, and then the money goes with the FOIA. Because it looked to me like the game being played was, I get to keep the money and I dump the FOIA somewhere else. And that's just, it should be a absolute solid, linking of those two. Thanks.
Thank you, Harold.
Hello, Margaret Alexander. I'm a Traverse City resident, and I'm here today to talk specifically about the opioid funds. I think, though, I've learned a lot today, and I think separating the marijuana funds from the opioid funds is important because we're dealing with two separate outcomes for those funds. And so I honor that maybe also the county needs some things. So perhaps all that marijuana money goes into helping support the county and their needs and the prosecuting attorneys. A little background here is that I come from a family who lost a 19-year-old niece 7 years ago to an overdose. She was involved with a very large drug-dealing family here in town. So we were instantly involved with law enforcement, with the prosecuting attorney's office, with Child Protective Services, and everybody did a great job supporting us. And I believe our tax dollars can continue to do that. So I'm hoping that we separate what the needs are for the communities, for the county, from the funds that are available. Maybe the marijuana money again goes into that. Second to that, for the last 4 years, including with a lady here in this room, 4 of us, we started Color for Hope, and we sold $30,000 worth of these posters, with substance abuse being the topic of $8 a poster. We gave $30,000 to the community in the last 4 years for naloxone to start out with, because it wasn't as common in the community 4 years ago, all the way to addiction treatment services, $8,000 to the Phoenix House so that they could open up for women to be getting rehabilitation while they had their children with them. Now, unfortunately, that's closed. So I caution money going to ways that we've always been doing to treat this issue with opiates. That if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. And that's services that are trying, but services that are not necessarily, are not necessarily creating results that we might need. So in our community where we have distilleries and dispensaries and wineries and brew pubs, I'm hoping that we're going to think outside the square with the opioid funds to provide those funds more specifically to things that we haven't thought about before, things that will be for positive lifestyles, for things that are not part of necessarily, again, nonprofits in the area doing things right now, who also might be doing redundant services. And think outside the square. And if something else that I would also advise you to look at is the city of Baltimore. I don't know if you've seen the series of articles with the Pulitzer Prize that was just given a month ago about the whole subject of opiates. For 6 years, this group of reporters has just now gotten a Pulitzer Prize about, and providing housing and providing some of these other things that did not work in their community. So it's another way to go look at it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. All right, public comment going once, going twice. We're over that. Comments, questions, or concerns? We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you.